Ma'am, the word landed flat the way a door closes before you reach it. I'm going to need you to step aside. Adrienne didn't flinch. She took one slow breath, the kind she'd been taking since she was 19, and learned that the first reaction is rarely the right one, and looked up from the marble counter. The young man who had said it wore a name tag that read Danny. He had the posture of someone who'd recently been handed authority and was still figuring out how to carry it without dropping it. "I have a reservation," Adrienne said, "under Holloway." "Yes, ma'am." He looked at the screen, then at her, then at the screen again. She knew that look, the look that said something doesn't add up, when the answer sitting in front of you doesn't match the answer you expected. "The thing is, this reservation is for the Pinnacle Suite. That's our top-floor accommodations, and bookings at that tier typically come through our private concierge line. There's a verification process." "I know there is," Adrienne said. "The pre-authorization is on file with the account." "Right," he clicked his pen. "Once, twice, 3 times. I'd still like to call my manager before I proceed." She stepped to the side and waited. She'd arrived at the Greystone Grand Chicago the way she always arrived at properties she owned. Alone, unannounced, carrying her own bag, no town car, no advance notice, no assistant walking ahead to smooth the path. She'd taken a cab from O'Hare. The driver had asked if she was in town for the housekeeping conference. She hadn't corrected him. The lobby was all warm mahogany and cream marble, and the smell of gardenias in tall crystal vases. 40 feet of soaring ceiling and a chandelier that had cost more than her first investment property. She had stood here at 9 years old and watched her father lift bags across this floor, and she had stood here at 34 and signed the acquisition papers, and she still left both things every time she came through those doors. Adrienne Holloway was 47. She wore dark slacks, a dove-gray cardigan over a white shirt, and flat shoes she could walk a property in for 4 hours without her feet giving out. Small gold studs in her ears, her mother's, given the night before she left for college. A battered leather tote that had seen better decades. A paperback with a cracked spine. To the Greystone Grand's Tuesday morning lobby, she read as exactly what they expected her to be. Someone who worked here, or someone who knew someone who did. That was fine. Checking in unannounced to her own properties was how she learned what was actually happening in them, as opposed to what the quarterly reports said was happening. The two were not always the same. She set her tote on the counter and watched. 2 desks down, a couple moved through check-in as though the desk wasn't really there. He in a slim-cut blazer, she in a cashmere wrap, both smiling at a third agent who smiled back and clicked key cards across marble in under 90 seconds. No verification, just warmth and efficiency and the quiet recognition of a guest who looked like the kind of guest the Greystone Grand had always imagined. Adrienne noticed. She always noticed. Across the lobby near the entrance, she saw something else. A young black man in a zippered college sweatshirt stood very still while a bellman in red checked a cart beside him, and then made a point of checking it again. The young man's jaw was set in the specific way she recognized. Not anger, not quite. The controlled patience of someone who has learned to be smaller than the space they're actually standing in. She knew that jaw. She had worn it her whole life. Her chest tightened. She looked away. Her father, Nathaniel, had worked the bell stand at this hotel for 28 years. He'd started the year Adrienne was born and retired the summer she bought her first property. A broken-down hotel in Memphis that nobody else wanted, that she'd spent 14 months and a line of credit she couldn't afford making functional, and then beautiful. He'd been at the ribbon cutting in his old Greystone Grand uniform. He'd said, "Now you'll know what it cost," and when she'd asked what he meant, he'd just squeezed her hand and smiled his patient, practiced smile, the one that had never fully been free. She kept his original Greystone Grand name tag in the side pocket of her tote, a small laminated rectangle, Nathaniel. The gold letters had faded to the color of old honey. She brought it on every work trip, the way other people brought a lucky coin or a family photograph. It reminded her where she'd come from and what she was building and who had stood at a bell stand, so she could stand anywhere she chose. She was thinking about that name tag when the manager arrived. Craig Halsey was 52, broad-shouldered, silver-haired, in the way of a man who decided to lean into his age. He carried himself forward, filling the room before his words did. 14 years as GM of the Greystone Grand. He wore the hotel's navy blazer with the gold crest, the same crest that was on her corporate letterhead. And he crossed the lobby with the deliberate pace of a man about to handle something. He didn't greet her. He looked at her the way you look at a discrepancy you've already resolved. "Ma'am." His voice was careful, controlled, the warmth of a man performing warmth. "I understand there's a question about your reservation." "There's no question," Adrienne said. "I have one. I'd like to check in." "Of course." He folded his hands. "Can I ask how this booking was made?" "Through the reservation system. Card on file under the corporate account." "Which account?" "Holloway Hospitality." Something moved across his face, a flicker of something she couldn't quite read. He turned briefly to Danny, who typed and then tried to turn the monitor, but Halsey was already talking again. "I'll need a valid photo ID and the card used for the booking." Adrienne handed over her driver's license and a matte black card with gold lettering, A. Holloway. Halsey studied both longer than necessary, turning them in his hands, looking from her face to the photo and back. "And your affiliation with Holloway Hospitality," he said. "What's your role exactly?" "I'm the owner." He let the silence spread. "The owner of the group, yes." "I see." He set both cards on the counter without returning them. "We'll need to verify that through our corporate line before completing the check-in." "Your corporate line," Adrienne said, "is my corporate line." "That's precisely the verification I'm referring to." It was the smile that did it. Not the words, not the held documents, but the thin, careful smile that came with those words, the practiced kindness sitting over something that was not kind at all. She recognized it the way you recognize a weather pattern you've grown up watching. Stay quiet, suspicious. Ask a question, difficult. Stay calm. They call it uncooperative anyway. The script never changed, only the costume. Near the bell stand, an older man in red was watching. Chester, 31 years at this property, silver at his temples, the unhurried efficiency of someone who knows a lobby's geometry by feel. He'd known her father. He looked at Adrienne for just a fraction of a second. Not recognition exactly, more like the recognition of a situation. He looked away before Halsey could notice. Adrienne said, "I'd like my documents returned while we wait. We hold them during verification." "Those are my documents. You don't hold them." "Ma'am." Halsey's tone shifted, the performance of warmth gone, replaced by something flat underneath it. "The Greystone Grand has a responsibility to its guests. If there's any irregularity—" "There is no irregularity." She kept her voice even. "You have a valid ID, a valid card, and a valid reservation in the name on both. We must be thorough. You checked in the couple at desk 2 without asking for a single document." The lobby went slightly quieter. Danny found something important to do with his keyboard. A woman in a cream turtleneck glanced over, and then away, lips pressed tight. Halsey looked at her with the particular patience of a man who has decided he is being generous. Then he lifted his radio. Troy Meeks arrived 2 minutes later, head of hotel security, wide through the shoulders, walked the way some men walk when they've already decided the outcome. He stood beside Halsey and looked at Adrienne the same way, not at her exactly, but at the category he'd placed her in before he crossed the lobby. "Is there an issue, Mr. Halsey?" "Guest is having difficulty verifying her booking." "I've provided a license and the card used," Adrienne said. "I've named the corporate account and offered my VP's direct line. The difficulty isn't mine." "Ma'am, lower your voice, please." "I haven't raised it." Troy looked at Halsey. Halsey gave a small nod. "There's a seating area near the east corridor," Troy said. "I'd like you to come with me while we sort this out." "I'd prefer to sort it out here, at the front desk, where I'm checking in." That wasn't a request. She knew what that sentence meant. She'd heard it in different rooms, different years, always with the same meaning underneath. The pretense of procedure giving way to the thing that had been there from the beginning. She picked up her tote. "I'm complying under protest." They walked her to a row of chairs near the east corridor. Not a back room, not that far, just far enough from the desk that she was out of the way and fully visible to every guest who came through the lobby. On display without anyone having said that was what it was. Troy stood nearby, not close enough to look like a guard, close enough to be one. A family passed with rolling bags and a toddler and did not look at her. A businesswoman in a tailored coat walked through fast, phone to her ear, and her eyes skimmed across Adrienne and kept moving. An older couple slowed fractionally, did the quick math of a black woman seated alone near the security corridor, and filed it under whatever category it satisfied before they reached the elevator bank. Adrienne kept her eyes forward. She counted the grout lines between marble tiles. She breathed in for 4 counts and out for 4, the way she'd taught herself to do in rooms exactly like this one. Rooms where the safest thing she could be was perfectly, unbearably still. From across the lobby, Chester had set down a luggage cart. He was looking at her. His face said, "I see this." It said, "I'm sorry." It said, "I know exactly what this is." He gave her the smallest nod. She nodded back. Halsey came back 10 minutes later. He had done something with her documents. He looked like a man who had made a call and had his certainty confirmed. "Mrs. Holloway, the reservation does exist. However, the user authorization on the Pinnacle Suite booking doesn't match our verification requirements for suite tier access. Because the authorization is mine, I am the authorized user. Our records show the account was established under a corporate umbrella that requires executive sign-off for this booking tier. I am the executive." "So, you've said." She reached into her tote. She removed the slim leather portfolio. She took out her Holloway Hospitality Group credentials. Laminated card, lanyard, company logo, photograph, and in clean block letters beneath her name, Chairwoman and CEO. She held it out. Halsey looked at it. He really looked. She watched his eyes move to the gold crest, the same crest embroidered on his own lapel. He handed it back. "I'll need to verify this independently. Anyone can produce a badge." Adrienne went still. The proof had been in his hand. The photograph matched the face in front of him. The logo matched his uniform, and he had given it back. Because the proof wasn't the problem. She was the problem, and no card, no license, no charge on a phone screen was ever going to fix that. She'd known this, underneath, since Danny first clicked his pen. She'd just been waiting to be certain. Her hand moved to the side pocket of her tote, found the small Ziploc bag through the fabric. Nathaniel Holloway had crossed this marble floor for 28 years, had lifted 1,000 bags and smiled his patient, costly smile at guests who looked through him like furniture, had done it so his daughter could go somewhere he never could. And she had gone, and she had built something, and she had come back and bought the building. And she was sitting in a chair near the East Corridor, while a man in her company's blazer told her she couldn't prove she belonged there. She took out her phone. She pressed a number she knew by heart. Halsey watched. "Your lawyer won't get here before we're finished." She didn't look at him. On the second ring, "Holloway Hospitality Operations, this is Wanda." "Wanda, it's Adrienne." She kept her voice level, quiet. "I'm in the lobby of the Greystone Grand Chicago. The GM is holding my documents. I've been moved to a waiting area. I need you at this property." She paused. "Now." The line went quiet for half a second. Then Wanda's voice changed, the sound of someone standing up fast and already reaching for a coat. "I'm leaving this second. Don't say another word to them." She hung up. Troy had his arms crossed. He and Halsey formed a wall of navy blazer and security jacket. They were presenting a unified front to a woman sitting alone with a battered tote on her knees and a Ziploc bag in her side pocket, and they had no idea what they were looking at. "Your VP of Operations," Halsey said carefully. "For which company?" Adrienne looked at him for a long moment. "For this one," she said. Wanda Briggs came through the main doors 11 minutes later, wool coat, portfolio under her arm, the stride of someone who managed 23 hotels and had just received a call she never expected to receive. Her badge swung from her neck. Her face was set in a way that said the calculation was done and the number was bad. She crossed the lobby without slowing. She went straight to the East Corridor, and when she saw Adrienne, the chair, the tote, Troy standing nearby, something moved through her expression that she didn't fully contain. Mrs. Holloway. She crouched in front of her, lowered her voice. Are you all right? Yes. Wanda stood. She turned to Halsey, and when she spoke, she let the lobby hear it. Do you know who this woman is? Halsey's certainty had a fracture in it now, a guest who was unable to verify. This is Adrienne Holloway, founder and chairman of Holloway Hospitality Group, majority shareholder in this building. She let it land before she continued. She doesn't verify it, Craig. You verify to her. She signs the account that pays your salary. Halsey's face changed by degrees, the lobby, its phones already rising, its guests turning, its staff going carefully still, watched it happen. Danny, at the front desk, had both hands flat on the counter like he needed something to hold. Chester had stopped moving entirely. Halsey reached into his jacket and produced the license and the card. He set them on Adrienne's open palm with the precision of a man trying not to let his hands shake. She stood. She was not a tall woman. She looked at Craig Halsey from a perfectly level distance and she said, quietly and without raising it once, How long have you been GM here, Craig? He swallowed. 14 years, Miss Holloway. In 14 years, it never struck you as worth examining why guests of color consistently show longer check-in times at this property than other guests. She opened her portfolio and unfolded a printed page she'd been carrying. I found 7 written complaints in the guest on services system. 3 years, all marked resolved, not one escalated to corporate. She put the page away. I read them on the plane this morning. The lobby had stopped performing its normal functions. People stood where they'd stopped. A teenager near the elevator banks had lowered her phone and then raised it again. Adrienne turned to Wanda. Her voice was steady and certain. Effective immediately, Craig Halsey's managerial authority over this property is suspended pending a full corporate review. No personnel decisions, no vendor authorizations, no guest escalations go through him. She looked at Troy Meeks, who had been very still and very pale for the past 4 minutes. Same for Mr. Meeks, she paused. And I want to know the name of every guest who submitted a complaint that was marked resolved without a corporate review. I want them contacted directly today. Wanda was already on her phone. Halsey's voice came out smaller than he'd intended. Mrs. Holloway, I had no way of knowing who you were. I was following procedure. You followed your instincts, Adrienne said, and called them procedure. That's not the same thing. She glanced at his blazer, the gold crest. That crest belongs to my company. I'd like it back before the end of the day. She turned away. She walked to the bell stand. Chester stood very straight, hands at his sides, watching her come. Chester, she said. Yes, ma'am. You knew my father. He held her gaze. His voice was quiet. 28 years, Miss Holloway. I overlapped with him for his last 9. Best man I ever worked this stand with. A pause. He used to talk about you. She reached into the side pocket of the tote. She took out the small Ziploc bag and from it removed the laminated rectangle. Nathaniel, gold letters faded to Old Honey. She held it up for a moment, not for anyone else, just for herself, just to feel the weight of it. He gave me this when I bought my first hotel, she said. He told me, now you'll know what it cost. I didn't really understand until today. Chester looked at the name tag. Something moved through his face that he didn't try to hide. He would have liked today, he said softly. Very much. Adrienne put the name tag away. She took one breath. Then she straightened her cardigan, picked up her tote, and looked toward the front desk. I'd like to check in now, she said, to no one and everyone. I have work to do. The fallout arrived fast and kept arriving. By noon, Halsey and Troy Meeks had turned in their credentials and been escorted from the property. By 2 o'clock, Danny Taft had submitted a written statement to Adrienne's legal team, not under compulsion, but of his own accord, the way a young man who did a small wrong thing in a bad moment sometimes does when he has 4 hours to sit with it. His statement was thorough. It described Craig Halsey's 14-year tenure in specific terms, the unspoken shorthand for which guests warranted extra scrutiny, the way that's just Craig reading a situation had become indistinguishable from official policy. Danny lost his job over it. He didn't contest the decision. The 7 complaints became 11 when the full archive was pulled. The documentation went to Adrienne's legal team, and from there to a civil rights organization that had been building a pattern of conduct file on luxury hotel chains for 2 years. The resulting federal investigation moved quickly, aided by 41 lobby phones worth of footage that cross-referenced to a timestamp and a marble floor and a woman sitting in one chair near the east corridor while the whole lobby decided what she was. Adrienne did one interview. She sat in the Pinnacle suite with the Chicago skyline behind her, and she said this: "Craig Halsey didn't create this problem. He was the problem's most recent manager. The question that matters isn't whether one GM got fired. The question is what system lets 7 years of complaints be stamped, resolved without anyone asking what that word actually meant." The civil suit settled 14 months later. Adrienne used the proceeds to establish the Nathaniel Fund, legal aid and travel equity resources for guests subjected to differential treatment at hospitality properties of any brand. The first 9 recipients were 9 of the 11 names from the buried complaints. Her team found every one of them. At the Greystone Grand, the changes were visible and designed to be. A guest rights statement went up at the front desk. Plain language, large print, readable from the check-in line. The complaint process now routes to an independent reviewer with no connection to property management. The word resolved by itself no longer closes a file. Chester became the Greystone Grand's director of guest experience. Adrienne created the title because the job he'd been doing for 31 years deserved one. He trains every new hire. He ends every session the same way. This lobby has decided, more than once, that someone didn't belong here. It was wrong every time. Your job is to make sure it stays wrong. Luz Cardenas, the front desk agent, who had tried twice to interrupt Halsey and been cut off both times, asked for a transfer to the corporate operations team. Adrienne interviewed her herself. She now works in property review, looking for the small signals, the pen clicks, the sideways glances, the quick radio call, before they settle into policy. On the morning Adrienne flew back after the suit resolved, she sat in a middle seat on a full coach flight because that was what was left. She had her tote, her crack-spine paperback, and the Ziploc bag in the side pocket. She didn't tell anyone who she was. She asked the flight attendant her name. When she deplaned, she left a note for the crew. The next time she arrived at the Greystone Grand, she took a cab from the airport the same way she always did. The doorman greeted her by name. The front desk agent, young, new, genuinely warm, checked her in quickly and handed over the key card with a smile that hadn't been rehearsed. Adrienne rode the elevator to the Pinnacle suite. She stood at the window for a long time, looking out at the city. Then she took the name tag from the Ziploc bag and held it for a moment, the way she always did at the end of a long day, just to feel its weight. Nathaniel gold letters faded. She thought about her father standing at the bell stand for 28 years, about what it had cost him, about what it had given her. She put the name tag away, sat down at the desk, and got back to work. Adrienne Holloway is not real. The Greystone Grand doesn't exist. Craig Halsey is a name I invented for a man who has 100 real names, and he's in a lobby somewhere right now, following his instincts and calling them policy. And the complaints he generates will be marked resolved by someone who finds it easier to bury a file than to read it. That part isn't fiction. So here is the question I want you to sit with. Not the comfortable version, the real one. In that lobby, there were dozens of people who watched it happen. Most of them kept walking. Danny told the truth 4 hours later, when it was safe enough to be honest. Luz tried twice and got shut down. Chester gave a nod from across a marble floor because a nod was all that was available to him. Which one would you have been? Not who you want to be, who you actually are, when the cost is yours, when it's not your problem, when nobody is looking yet and speaking up means something real. Drop your honest answer in the comments. I read them, and share this with someone who needs to see it, because the next person in that chair might not have a phone number that ends it for them. The very least any of us can do is not look away. If this story stayed with you, hit like. It helps more people find it. Subscribe to Velvet Reckoning. We'll be here to kit about the trend for the people who never owned the building.